Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Holly. I'm the MD of BIMA. Today we are going to be talking about being the business your leader needs. We've got Johnny Toos, who is a good friend of BIMA, Group CEO of Lab, who's going to host a session. And we've got three other fantastic panelists who he'll kick off by introducing. So before I hand over to Ant, who's just going to run through some of how the session will work, I just wanted to talk to you about what's going on for the rest of the week and into next week. So we are pretty much running an event a day here at BIMA, and the demand is really high. What we're trying to do is run things that provide you clarity in what is an incredibly, challenging environment and also a really noisy one. So BIMA Hangouts are where we bring experts around a specific topic. Tomorrow at 3, we have one on new business and marketing. On Thursday, we have a leadership roundtable that's sold out, I believe, but we do this every Thursday. So you can go online and sign up for next Thursdays. And on Friday, we have a general HR one. So obviously, coronavirus has brought up lots of things we've never thought we'd need to think about. And Friday's session is for you to be able to ask those questions to a panel of HR consultants and kind of agency experts. Next week, we'll be doing stuff on mentoring, more leadership. We'll have our second finance and legal one. So stay tuned. We'll be launching all of that on Thursday. So let me pass you on to Ant, who's just going to briefly talk about the way the Q&A will work this morning.
Thank you, Holly. Yes, I'll be very brief. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Sorry if you've heard this 10 times. I've attended every webinar that we've done, but just for those who are new, there is a Q&A portion of the screen at the bottom on Zoom. If you click on Q&A, you'll be able to ask your questions to the panelists and they'll do their best to answer them. We want this to be an interactive session, so make sure you ask your questions. And yeah, like I said, the panelists will address that. We will also be running a poll throughout the discussion. So if you see some questions flash up on your screen, don't be alarmed. It's just a little poll for the panelists to gauge how you guys are feeling and see what you guys are thinking and whatnot. So if you don't see those poll questions, it's most likely because you're on Zoom for browser. But those who are using the Zoom native client, you should be able to see those questions. But yeah, so watch out for that poll. Ask your questions by clicking on the Q&A panel. But yeah, that's all from me. Without further ado, actually, one more thing. This is being streamed to YouTube. There'll be a link going up on our Slack channels and in the follow-up email. So make sure you share the YouTube link out with your teams because it's super beneficial. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our host of today, and that is Johnny. So Johnny, if you want to kick us off.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Holly, and welcome everybody to this BIMA Hangout. This is the first one I've hosted, so I'm obviously going to mess it up, but bear with me as best as humanly possible. I'm here with 3 brilliant people today who are going to be really the focus of the narrative we're talking about. And the key thing is, obviously, we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. That word is now banned, but I've heard it too many times. But we're obviously all in a very, very tough situation. The agency landscape's been hit quite badly, I would say, from the conversations that I've been having with multiple agency owners. And today is talking about leadership. And the reason I wanted to particularly host this one is that I personally love leadership. I've obsessed about leadership for the last 10 years. And for me, I think it's one of the most important things right now for us to really focus on as sort of agency owners or people from, in senior positions within businesses. And I think, the focus today is to look at some of the key topics around leadership and how we can use our leadership to make this situation as best as possible. And we've got various topics we're going to go through. So in the first instance, what we're going to do is just do some quick introductions. I'll do a a 5-second introduction for me. So I run a digital agency called Lab, which has recently become a group last year. We're about 85 people in total, mainly focused in the digital space. So I'm going to introduce my other panelists, or I'm not going to, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. So I have 3 amazing people with me. Gillian Moore is Managing Partner and Global Head of Digital Transformation Practice at Atos. Zandra Moore, Chief Executive Officer and CEO and co-founder of Pan Intelligence, and Jamie Jefferson, co-founder of Equator. So Gillian, would you like to introduce yourself very briefly?
Yep, happily. As you said, I run the global digital transformation practice at Atos, which is interesting at this point in time because I have teams not just in the UK, but also in France, Holland, Germany, Spain, you name it, lots of countries, Poland, that have got really interesting things going on at the moment. And I also have a second role as chair of a charity in London called London Sport, which is part of the Sport England Active Partnership Network. So we're also very focused on helping get people active in the capital. Again, particularly pertinent at this point in time because staying at home, keeping active, fundamental to everybody's mental health and so on. So I'm quite involved in that side of things at the moment as well.
Wonderful, thanks, Jane. And Zandra, would you like to do a quick intro?
Thanks, Johnny. So yes, CEO and founder of Pan Intelligence. We're a Leeds-based business up in Yorkshire. All of our team are there, actually. It's a bit easier for me. We have 46 people in the business. We're a data analytics software developer, so very much a technology product company. We closed our Series A round in November, very lucky actually to be in a position to scale the business up and have cash in the bank at a very difficult time for a lot of businesses. That said, the decisions we make now are actually really essential to how we scale and grow this year, and obviously that's changed our plans significantly. I'm also the founder of a women's network and that focuses on diversity and leadership. We have 750 members in Yorkshire, and like this, we're removing all of our sort of sessions remotely and trying to keep people thinking about how they can pivot their own leadership and management styles to support their teams.
Fantastic, thanks, Zandra. And Jamie in sunny Scotland, would you like to do a quick intro too?
Hi there. So I'm Jamie Jefferson. My day job is Chief Creative Officer at Equator. I'm also one of the co-founders. So we are a digital transformation agency. We've been around since 1999. We currently have a staff of about 150 people. We're based in Glasgow and in London. And my actual day job is really focused around the creative aspects of the business. So really looking after the output. And one of the questions obviously today is to think about how we can maintain quality output and I suppose in a sense in brackets maintain output during this period. I'm also involved in the Inclusion and Diversity Council for BIMA. So I'm kind of very much involved in BIMA and looking at how we create gender equal but generally equal sort of world for in agency and in digital land. And I think those sort of questions are very pertinent right now as well. So it's a question of how do we treat people with sort of fairness and compassion when businesses like ours, like all of ours, are under immense pressure.
Right, that's amazing. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to kick off with the topic of communication, and really, again, with sort of more of a leadership focus. As leaders, guys, what has it been like communicating with your team and having conversations? I mean, obviously, a lot of it's changed because a lot of it's now digital. But can you sort of just talk a little bit about your experiences with communication with your team and how maybe your team are communicating together as well? Zandra, would you like to start?
Yeah, it sounds like I probably have the easier job than most of you. My team is smaller or based in one region. In fact, we're all based in one office normally. So our culture and dynamics of that team were very strong. So as soon as we moved to home working, which is just over 2 weeks ago now, it's been quite easy for us to do that transition. Like many of your organisations, digital focus, so we're a tech business. So it was very easy for people to just switch on to a digital way of communication with each other. So I think we've had it quite easy in that transition because of the nature of our business. We have created more opportunities for informal and formal regular communication with teams. So we have a virtual coffee break every day at 2 o'clock where everybody from the company can join, bring a cup of tea, chat about nonsense, to be quite frank. We also have a happy hour on a Friday, which is, you know, down tools at 4 o'clock, bring a drink, alcoholic or not, and we have a quiz, and it's just fun interaction. So I think we've geared up and dialed up some of the informal interactions to make sure that there's a balance in those communications, so people still feel part of that team and that culture that they all miss, to be quite frank, because they're used to being physically together in one space. There's just more of it, and there's different channels, but I think we've managed that as a team well, only because of the sort of size of our operation. I think at the number of people we have, you can put your arms around that and put your arms around everybody quite quickly. So it's been a positive transition for us.
Interesting. And Jamie, what about you? You've got 2 offices, or normally, so you I guess you're used to sort of remote communication between those 2 in Glasgow and London. How have you found? You know, I mean, I guess you guys are similar. You're quite set up for, you know, we'll use Slack or something like that. And it'd be interesting to see how the team communicate, but also from a leadership point of view, what kind of messaging have you given your team? Have you sort of done the big speech? Have you set out formal communications? What kind of stuff have you done to help support people through this crazy time?
We've done a range of things. I would say start on the sort of process and operational side. We are already set up. The business is made up of a lot of different specialisms, and the collaboration aspect of things and digitizing that has been, actually, in a sense, we've been lucky. It's been our focus as we've scaled over the last 5 years, if you like, to sort of automate or digitize that and get a process that works from start to finish. And that's in, you know, like from right through, we use like the Atlassian stuff. So that's Jira and all of those things. And that can connect together all of the different aspects of a project. And we also use, I mean, I don't know what everybody else uses for chat, but we use Teams, which is really useful as well. So all of that was fairly painless. We were able to, we didn't do it all in a one-er. We switched off or moved Teams to be virtual step by step. In order to make sure that we didn't overload the system and all that kind of stuff. Because I think one of the things with agencies is we tend to, I know this is very granular, but we tend to deal with large files, and there's a lot of data transfer required. So to make sure that everything works smoothly, that was a really, really important consideration. We didn't just sort of all disappear out of the office and then it all fell over. But for us, that stuff being in place already meant that really the focus was on individual communication. So, and yes, there's been lots of that. So we take a lot of pride in, as we get bigger, maintaining that direct connection with everybody in the business. So we've done several sort of all hands, if you like, all full company conversations to explain, you know, where we're going and what we're doing. And I think it was really interesting because as this started to sort of come out and become an issue, the coronavirus thing, people have shifted. You know, the first thing was, oh, when do I get to work from home? You know, people had that kind of feeling that that was what was going to happen. And then sort of slightly following that, there was a kind of realization, if you like, that this was going to be incredibly damaging for businesses as well. You know, so I'm sure lots of agencies involved will maybe have had work pulled or paused, and that is creating a lot of stress as well. So there's a lot of tension there, this moving to working from home, but also this potential for things to change quite drastically in the future. So in my mind, the face-to-face, as much as it can be, communication, direct communication is super important, because not only is it about creating new structures. So I love that we do the coffee thing. We haven't done a quiz yet. I love that idea. We might do that. But having a kind of agreed new way of conversing with people that manages things like, you know, when are you working and when are you not working, so that people have flexibility, but everybody has trust as well. These things are really, really important, and to set them up in as clear a way as you possibly can at the very beginning, so people know what the new rules are for their new, if you like, regime. I think that's been super helpful.
And thanks, Jamie. Do you think, you mentioned the word trust there? I mean, trust has got to be one of the most important things, right? When you're all of a sudden going from an office-based environment to everyone working remotely and ultimately being fairly autonomous in terms of when they're choosing to work and everything else like that. And someone mentioned to me that you know, what they're seeing is the, you know, businesses, particularly agencies, but businesses in general, now moving to a more modern outcome focused organization, rather than kind of more kind of command and control, spoon feeding and type management. And do you think that it's trust is now like one of the most important things in business? Is it potentially?
I think it's incredibly important, and I mean, as a sort of manager or whatever, when you have a team that are in front of you, you can sort of, you have the confidence to sort of dip in and talk to them and see how they're doing. When they're not there physically, then if you don't have a kind of agreed playbook, if you like, then it's very easy for that to sort of start to fall apart. And so I was very keen, and we were all very keen, that we had, you know, quite clear rules about how we engage with one another. So simple things like, you know, which meetings you're expected to be at, you know, making sure that if someone's chatting with you on Teams or asks you a question, that you respond really quickly, so that we can keep the wheels turning. Those little changes are things that were less important when we're all in an office together, but all of a sudden when we're remote and we can't see each other, become incredibly important. And yes, I mean, we are in a much more outcome oriented piece, but people do have, it is a full-time job. It is a kind of, there are roles in the business which are about being there, you know, being present, being ready to take the call from the client or whatever. So, you know, when people are there, and the coverage element of it is really important as well. So we've got to take all of those things into account.
Lovely, thanks, Jamie. And Gillian, from a sort of more global perspective, Atos is a very, very large company, and obviously you're managing multiple people in multiple countries, and obviously different countries not only have different laws, and France, for example, has very, very strict employment law compared to some of the other regions that you must be managing. And, you know, dealing with that, I mean, you're dealing with different cultures, you're dealing with different laws and processes. How are you handling all of that at the same? Is it quite intense?
It's always intense, to be honest, and I don't think the current situation has changed that side of things very much at all. There are very different cultures in different areas. I mean, as you said, Atos, we're 110, 120,000 people globally. So we have a constant challenge in terms of how we communicate to all of those. How do you get the same message out to everybody? Quite frankly, you don't, right? It's just not possible. So we have to kind of think at it at a very big level and also very small level, and just communicate to our teams as well. So in my team, it's times like this where that old saying about making sure that you connect with every member of your team on a regular basis becomes really important. I'm a firm believer in having regular one-to-ones with all of my leadership team, you know, once a week for half an hour or whatever, all the time. And it's times like now when that becomes really important, because that means we already have all that rapport, we already know each other, we can have conversations about things that would be hard to generate that kind of trust if I had to do it now in the moment. And it's now where that's important, because it means that I can understand the different things that everybody's going. It's not that different at the moment. Everybody kind of has the same challenges. Everybody's in some form of lockdown or another. Everybody's dealing with different home pressures that they've got to cope with in the background. Everybody's dealing with the general sense of apprehension that I think everybody in the world's got at the moment. So yes, there are cultural differences, but there are also a lot of commonalities. And just to reflect on some of the things that people have talked about, I mean, we already work very distributed anyway, so all the tools are in place. I spent my life on conference calls before this started, so this isn't that new. But handling the emotional side of it when people are more devolved is harder, and kind of keeping that sense of community and sense of connection is harder, and looking at that. So I've found in the communication side of things, trying to understand and appreciate as much as I can that emotional side and talk to people about it. And that's where the cultural differences actually matter more, because people respond emotionally in different ways in different cultures. That actually has become more important to me. The corporate galactic headquarters are kind of handling the very practical communications. And my role has become very much more about trying to understand what's happening with my team emotionally and how we keep that going.
That's amazing, thank you. It's a very difficult think, sort of emotionally connecting with people over a screen. I think, for me, I don't really mind working remotely or anything. I'm fine with it, but it's quite interesting how this has kind of been a bit of a wake-up call in terms of how important face-to-face communication is. If it's just all the little sort of inflections of people's responses and just that in the moment kind of feeling that is quite hard, I think, to replicate digitally. But and I think a lot of people are kind of feeling that sort of same thing. I think when this is finished, I think when this all is over and we're back in the office, I think I'm not going to use video calling for about 3 months just to get over it. I think it's quite interesting. So we talked a lot there, some operational communication stuff and everything else, but it kind of leads into the next topic, which is sort of new ways of working. And we're all having to work in different ways now. I mean, clearly, we're working in a different way right now, but sorry, that's my mobile phone on. So I should really turn it off, being a host. But can we talk a little bit about ways of working and what has changed, if anything? I mean, we're all digital businesses. We're all used to kind of working connected and sort of in different times and all the rest of it. But has anything specific changed for you? And Zandra, do you want to sort of answer that first?
Yeah, I was going to start with just a follow on from your point before, Johnny, and then I'll talk about ways of working. I think we found something really special about being in people's homes. So I've met the children, the pets, the partners of members of my team and know more about their lives now than I've ever known, ironically. Know about their personal interests just by seeing what's in their room. And there's something about that that's enriched my relationships with the team that perhaps wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for video conferencing. So I hear what you say. I'm looking forward to being back in a room physically with people. But there's been something that's actually enriched some of those relations. I do think there's something about people being in their homes where their guards are down a little bit more. And therefore they come into those conversations a bit more open and ready to share. So I think there's a real opportunity to connect with people actually through this medium. That yes, we lose a bit through that physical interaction, but I think we're sort of in people's lives a bit more in a way that we should try and make the best of that, is my feeling anyway.
No, I think that's a really lovely point, Zandra, and I think it's one of the ways where I think Gillian mentioned as well about people sort of having conversations as well. It's weird how coronavirus in some ways is actually bringing us closer together. So let's probably take the positives.
Yeah. Always look for the upside always. But operationally, ways of working, I found that the short informal chats are much more frequent. So people just jumping onto a call with you in the office, perhaps they would feel like they didn't want to interrupt you, would wait to have a more kind of formal meeting or something. They would gather all of the things they wanted to talk to you about, perhaps for a particular conversation point. I'm finding that's kind of gone, and that's been brilliant because those little touch points every day means we're becoming even faster at dealing with things as a business. So there's an increased agility by removing some of that physicality we found. So operationally, there's a speeding up, which has actually got rid of some of the politics and process and boundaries that perhaps we all create in our own minds, where people think, oh no, I don't want to disturb, or I don't want to interrupt, or I'll wait till I have that formal one-to-one. So we, like yourself, Gillian, have always every manager does weekly one-to-ones, even if it's half an hour, but it's just that checking in point. It's not about to-do lists. It's about how are you, how are things, how are your relationships. We still do those, but these little check-in points using Teams and all these other technologies we've got, where people can just have 2 minutes and they'll dial you and ask the question and go again. Have sort of created a fluidity to business, which has been, I think, is driving innovation. People are suggesting more things, coming up with ideas. That flow I think is really helping us, and I think it's accidental. I'd like to say it was intentional leadership strategy. It's purely accidental, but there's a real. It's definitely breaking down some barriers which perhaps we hadn't even realised were there, and bringing team members up to share their ideas in a much more kind of conversational and open way, people that wouldn't normally. So that's something I've noticed. It's not really a shift in working, but it's something that's definitely changed, if that makes sense.
Well, I think you sort of said it's not necessarily intentional leadership, but I think being aware of seeing change in the organisation and then supporting it is exactly what a good leader does. So I think that's brilliant, and I think that's what we should all do. And I think it's funny actually because you mentioned process, which I want to link over to Jamie actually on, but processes, I see them changing in our organisation as well, and I think you know, it's one of those times where when there's so much change, you kind of, you know, you've ripped up the rule book in many ways. And while there are many processes that you still use and work and rely on, I think it's one of those things that makes you step back and look at all the things you're doing and look at some processes and think, why did we do that? You know, why are we doing it that way? And it's amazing how quickly things change. So Jamie, you talked about process around communication as well, and how process is important to be able to you know, stop problems really occurring, which a lot of communication seems to center around. And can you just talk a little bit about, you know, your ways of working and maybe processes that may have changed, or just to focus on that?
I suppose the truth of the matter is, from a project point of view, very little has changed. We already work in like a distributed way, as everybody else has said. So I think what I would say is there's a differential between larger projects and smaller projects, because larger projects involving lots of team members have always been very structured and very clearly managed by someone who's dedicated to that thing, and wherever those people are, they can work exactly the same, no problem at all. Interestingly, what I've noticed is on little smaller things, where it's just kind of quick in and out type projects, where they tended to rely on a little chat here and there. Those are the ones where we need to establish a little bit more of an approach, if you like, an agreed approach. So I've seen, you know, what I've got an amazing team, and everybody is trying really, really hard to make sure that we're continually busy. You know, they're very conscious of clients running a little bit slower than they might otherwise have been, and that we want to make sure that we've got the studio, you know, jammed with good stuff to do. So they're really, you know, everybody's trying hard to kind of keep the thing going. And in that scenario, when there are little projects which don't have a kind of agreed process, they just kind of go through without touching the sides, to use the agency parlance, then those are the ones that are slightly more problematic, because you have to sort of say, well, actually, it doesn't just go through without touching the sides, it needs to do X, Y, Z. And in our case, it's like, you know, raise a ticket, have a conversation with the appropriate people who are feeding in, like the insights team or the creative team or the development team or the marketing team, you know, get everybody on a quick call, agree what the, if you like, broad scope of the thing is, and then everybody can time that and come back, you know, but all of these things really in a really light way, so that they can happen without holding things back, because these projects are very, you know, time constrained. So I think being able to do those things efficiently is really, really important. And I've noticed a sort of slight change in, not change in process, but like a kind of having to sort of say, well, this is a thing we need to have a conversation to make sure we're all on the same page about. So over the last few days, I've definitely been seeing more of that. The other thing I've been noticing, and I think that, you know, the biggest change, we've sort of all touched on it, the biggest change is, in a sense, a cultural thing. And there's a little bit of fear of change, you know, like what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to my job. So everybody's kind of a little bit on edge. A fear of, you know, maybe not being in the loop, and who do I talk to about this and that kind of stuff. I've certainly found one of the benefits of working like this, which I really, really love, is, and actually I think I probably will keep it after this whole thing happens. I mean, I'm very interested to see, you know, like we should, you know, check. I've been taking lots of screenshots because I'm wondering how things are going to progress over the next 3 months as we all sort of start to sort of fall apart and become more feral. I'm wondering, you know, which
trousers for a start, so you know,
the music style of approach, the same. I definitely do that. I'm definitely sort of like not bothered about the bottom half. So like, but I think some of those things, some of those changes will stay. And one of them is, for me, the ability to sort of, if you like, call into my room at any given moment the exact people that I need. I don't have to go wandering around the studio, hopefully find people, make a meeting. It's that immediacy, which, just because I had the option of wandering around the office before, that's what I tended to do, because face-to-face communication would be deemed better. But now that that's not possible, those people can be anywhere all of a sudden, and that it sort of levels the playing field, but it makes collaboration, weirdly, kind of easier. So I think when we've got that habit, that's really, really good. And I think one of the people in the chat said, you know, there is an etiquette around that, you know, making sure that you're messaging people first, so you're respectful of their time, and saying, you know, can we have a chat? Because this whole medium now, this digital working medium, can be very interruptive as well, and we can end up doing no work at all and just chatting online all day. And I think that managing that is important as well. So overall, from a project point of view, not a huge amount of change, but the way that we interact and the sort of, if you like, the care and compassion to make sure that we're bringing people along with us and respecting their time, but also generating trust, as I mentioned, and managing those little edge cases, if you like, that we just sort of worked around when we were in a studio together are the kind of key areas.
Okay, that's lovely. So I'm just going to move on to another topic, which is culture, and you mentioned it quite a few times there, Jamie. And I think I was on a Goldman Sachs briefing last week, and it was quite interesting to hear what they were saying about the economy. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of how deep this will go later on. But they were mentioning around business response to sort of COVID-19 and what people are doing and what the priorities really are. And the key message that came out of that was culture. And the number one thing for businesses to focus on right now is how to retain and keep their culture, because when we come out of this, it's what's going to really be left to sort of rebuild. And some businesses will have to rebuild from the ground up, and others will have to kind of dust themselves down. But I think we're all going to have some element of rebuild to do once this is, once normality is restored, should it ever restore. And so, Gillian, can you talk a little bit about culture, and especially, from a very large international business like Atos, what has been the focus for you guys in terms of culture, and what are you doing to ensure that your culture persists, from your values and your strengths and your overall vision as a business? Is that something that has been on the radar?
Wow, throw me the difficult questions. You use the phrase there about maintaining and rebuilding our culture, but I actually think it's about using this to evolve the culture. So, and it kind of builds on the things that Jamie was talking about as well, and actually this isn't normal, but what's happening at the moment is that people are forming new habits, and people are prioritizing the things that they think matter for them to do their job. And from that, we need to listen and learn, and then weave that into the culture and engagement going forwards. We can't put these things back in a box at the end if this is what people want and people get used to, and these new habits that they form. I've been using the analogy a lot recently about the Second World War, and the fact that was probably the biggest step in women becoming significant in the workforce, because everyone went out to work during that time, and when the war was over and all the men came back, you couldn't stop the women going out to work anymore. It was out of the box and it was happening. So I'm not sure what the equivalent of that will be now, but something will happen whereby people will pick up habits and cultures and ways of engaging that we can't say, right, okay, now we're back to normality. How do we shut the door on those and go back to what we were? So I think it's more important to recognize that the culture will evolve, and what we need to be doing at the moment is listening and learning and working out what that should be. And I've just kicked off a project with my team in Atos, where we're actually going to go out to all of the team and capture what people are thinking, feeling, doing at the moment, what they like and what they don't like, so that we have our own data set, our own social history going forwards. And I think Sam said, if we may forget over the next few weeks or months, but we've got that data set that we can look back on and go, okay, these are the things people were prioritizing. These are the things that are really important to them. These are the fixes that people have created. These are the ways that people are engaging. How do we now take that into our culture and behavior and so on going forwards, and create a new culture and a new norm? Because I don't think we can maintain what we had before. It's going to change.
No, I think you are right. That's a lovely thought, actually. That the habits that we're forming now is they are habits. We can't just brush them away. They will be habits that continue forward. So it's lovely to think like that, actually, as well. And so Jamie, so what's your thoughts on culture? And also, I think can we just take a moment to empathise with the agencies that are having to make significant cuts? I mean, there are many agencies out there at the moment which I've been speaking to who have furloughed all of their staff, some of which have had to make quite brutal redundancies, and they are going to have to come back from that. And could you give some sort of thoughts and advice in terms of maybe what you would do in that situation in terms of restoring culture?
Well, yes, I can try. It's a tough time, and I think that, like we just sort of talked about, the culture really being built around communication. I feel that we felt very, very strongly as we've gone into this that we have to be as open and honest with the team as we possibly can, so that they understand that it's more than just working from home, that you know, there's a lot of challenges, and some of the people who are a lot more client facing obviously see that a lot more keenly than some others. But we have to make sure that everybody understands that, and that reflects right down to, you know, even just recording time on a daily basis, just to make sure that we're able to recognize all the revenue that we've got coming in, all of that, you know, really functional stuff. It still connects with our general desire to make sure that the wheels are still turning. But of course, you know, we have had to furlough a few people. We've deliberately, I mean, it's, you know, we're under pressure, and we've had to do that, and we have to make sure that we cut our cloth because there are certain pieces of work that have been paused. But we are very conscious of the fact that things will come back at some point, and I certainly wouldn't want to be, well, I'm very aware that some businesses are not able, and I'm sure everybody will hate to make people redundant at this time. I mean, this is just the most horrible decision that you could have to make, because it's not like it's easy to find a job if you're put out of work at this time. So from our point of view, you know, our team are paramount, and it's been absolutely central to our thinking that we maintain that workforce and the ability for them to kind of come back to work later. I know that the furlough arrangements with the government, obviously you don't get your money back straight away. You have to have some money in the bank to make sure you're covering that, and we're obviously making sure that we can support that as much as possible. And by the same token, also making sure that everybody understands that, and we're pulling the work in as fast as we can. All of these things are kind of little I suppose cogs in the machine, but it's about sort of a collective understanding of that situation. And in the same way that the government's doing, you know, sort of saying we're all in it together, that's what the business has to do as well. The business has to do as well. So that we understand that we are all in it together, that our combined success is an effect or a result of every action that we're taking, every conversation that we're having, and maintaining a positive outcome, moving things forward, being as engaged with clients as we are with each other. So I've noticed, you know, one of the nice things is the same as with staff, you know, actually being able to see into our clients' lives. And that's actually built quite strong relationships already over the last couple of weeks. So I think that there is an opportunity here. There is an opportunity, but also, you know, also a challenge for us to sort of weather the storm as much as we can. And the only way we can do it is to do it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so being in it together, Zandra, if you comment, obviously you're in a slightly different situation in that you've got your backing and Series A funding. And from a cultural point of view for you, maybe you could just focus on the mental health and some of the fears that you face, because obviously, you know, culture, especially in times of change, culture is very vulnerable. And you're obviously doing quite a lot in terms of some of the the sort of morning tea and the check-in on Fridays with boozy check-ins, things like that. It sounds like you're doing quite a lot on that. And what are your thoughts around keeping that culture during this time, and especially focusing on sort of the mental health of people?
Okay, I'll talk a little bit more about what we do. I just wanted an observation really that I thought might be useful to follow on from what Jamie said as well, if that's okay. So we're a sort of consumer of digital services. We're not a digital agency, and we have 3 digital agencies that we're working with at the moment. So you're right, we're in a fortunate position because we're in a scale-up phase, and what we do is data analytics, and we do that globally, and we work with sectors like healthcare, retail, and logistics, areas that are actually doing well, and therefore we're less impacted and fortunate, right? I recognise that people are not as fortunate as we are. That said, we can continue to execute projects with those agencies that we work with, but we're having to do them differently. So today, right at this moment, my team are on a branding workshop, what we were supposed to all be getting in a room and doing together, and we're rebranding. And actually this is now the agency has had to pivot very quickly in thinking about how they run those workshops. They've made them smaller, they're doing them more frequently with people, they've structured them and broken them down into 1.5 hour segments as opposed to half day and full day workshops. So they've pivoted quite quickly on how they usually deliver their services. That has enabled us to continue to do that, because I can't have my whole team in front of a screen for a full day running workshops. It just doesn't work.
Yeah,
so
crazy.
it's been really interesting to see. We've kind of gone back and said, we can continue to do this stuff with you, but we're going to have to do it differently. And that agility and being able to go back and offer services, and just reflecting on my team and mental health and well-being. It's purposeful employment, and being busy is so important. And our team, we've got consultants who are used to delivering face-to-face services, and the number of services we can deliver remotely is not as great as the stuff that we do face-to-face. And actually some of our clients simply would prefer to do these things physically and not remotely. It's just the nature of how they want to deliver projects. So it does have an impact on the way other businesses operate. So giving them other things to do and finding other services, a bit like our agencies have done in helping us to continue branding and workshops to enable us to continue. I want to come out of this with a fantastic brand, website, good to go, launch pad, out to market. So I need that to be still in flight. But equally, our customers need us to deliver services differently, and it helps my team to feel purposeful, engaged. So everybody thinking creatively, quickly about how they do what they usually do, but perhaps in a different way. And often for us, that's about chunking it down into smaller lumps of focused activities that can be delivered slightly differently, perhaps for different groups. And I'm not saying that's the whole part of mental health, but so much is people feeling less nervous about their day-to-day by having something that they know is delivering value. And if people are doing things that are delivering value, then they feel, or we tend to find people feel much safer and more secure in their role. And that's why we have, I think, as leaders, to think very quickly about the services, products, and things that our teams are doing, and how those things can be done differently, equally helping our suppliers to do the same. And yes, we have the teas, check-ins, and we have all hands meetings on a Friday, and quizzes, and all sorts of social type engagements. But I don't think anything makes people feel safer than purposeful, valuable employment and activities that they know is helping the business to survive and thrive. I think that's really important. Does that answer it? I think
it does. It's lovely. I think that's a really, really lovely answer. I think it's great as well for a lot of agencies that are on the webinar as well, listening to somebody who's buying agency services and understanding how they would like to work better. And certainly, a lot of people will be offering workshops and things like that to get projects started, or midway through, or whatever it might be, whether it's branding or strategy or digital or technical workshops, whatever. And just to hear that feedback as well in terms of breaking it down into chunks so that it's reasonable to do. So I don't think anyone wants to sit in front of a computer for an entire day, and sort of breaking that down, I think, is a really, really good thing. But that's really good to hear. Okay, and also, I think I completely agree with you. I think it's what Dan Pink said. It's autonomy, mastery, purpose are the key things that create sort of motivation and happiness in the workforce and engagement. And I think I entirely agree with you that if people feel like they're delivering value, then they feel like they have that purpose. They feel like they're doing something sensible. So it's great. And a very, very good point, I think. So one of the things I want to talk about was great work. So delivering great work is the bread and butter of every business, really. It's in the agency landscape. I think Nikki Gattenby from PropellerNet wrote a book called Super Engage, which, if you haven't read it, by the way, you should read it. It's the ultimate book on how to run a great agency. But she is very clear that it's all agencies have to be people first, which is what we've talked about in terms of culture, but also really focusing on great work. So if you are a people first business, then you have the ability to be able and really do care about your people and support them, then they will do great work. And if you do great work, you'll have a great business, and clients will stay with you and want to order more and buy more from you. So in terms of great work, one of the things you mentioned there, Sandra, was around workshops changing as well. We talked a little bit about working practices kind of changing in the business. But Gillian, maybe you could talk to us about great work and quality and how you guys are handling that. And is it different now? Is it more of a priority now? How are you dealing with that as a business?
To be honest, I don't think that's changed. I think somebody already said that in terms of the way projects are being run and what we're doing, there aren't as many changes as perhaps you'd think being driven by this. So great work is still very much a focus. I mean, we're more on the technology side. So what we're doing is more about building and delivering things. I mean, we've got guys doing and women doing amazing things at hospitals and the NHS and so on to get them spun up and supporting that. So maybe our definition of great work maybe tweaked ever so slightly, because at the moment great work is stuff that's actually helping and contributing. Back to the point about people needing to be adding value and doing things that matter. It's still the same focus. It's still a focus on making sure our projects are to quality, making sure that we're delivering, that we're working with the clients, and that we're talking about that internally as well, so that people are aware of the sort of work that we're doing across the organisation and can see that we are still delivering, we're still making things happen, we're still getting feedback from our clients. And I would say our clients have been really good as well about giving feedback and encouraging feedback at this point in time. So not in a kind of sycophantic, oh, we all love each other way, but in a genuine, it helps the staff, you know, if their client at this particular point in time is feeding back to say, we know you're doing what you can, we appreciate what you're doing. And that really adds value to people as well. So completely still the focus on great work, but just maybe the way it's defined, the way we're communicating is ever so slightly tweaked at this point in time to help people feel that they're adding more value.
Okay, great. And I think definitely, you know, sort of linking both those points, absolutely. If any workforce is currently working on anything that helps this with the NHS or whatever it might be, that will be certainly the sense of purpose, I think, behind that. And so, Jamie, talking about sort of great work, you know, what about you guys? Have you changed anything in terms of how you're working? I mean, and also one of the other points that Gillian made there, and maybe you could comment on this, Jamie, is around sort of, you know, communicating the work that you are doing. And we always call it celebrating success on the basis that you know, celebration is the ultimate antidote to stress. Do you agree with that statement? Are you doing that too?
I think that's a great statement. I guess I do agree with it. Yes, I think it's good. I think celebrating success is vital. I was thinking, just reflecting on where does great work come from there? And it's like, obviously it comes from individual talent, collaboration, and a kind of push from others, you know, sort of challenge. And I think that the first two we've sort of talked about, right? So I think the individual talent, in many ways, actually, in our business, I hear people actually quite enjoying the peace and quiet, and, you know, getting on with things and having a bit of focus time. That's been a sort of positive in many ways. The collaboration piece, obviously, I think there's this is where we're moving into some new habits in terms of people feeling able to open up a channel of communication with whoever they need to speak to at any given time to help support them, or, you know, answer questions or chat through an idea and those kind of things. And then I think the last one, which is the kind of challenge, if you like, sort of the job of, you know, the creative director or the sort of senior person in the creative role, or whoever that is. And I think that therein lies maybe something that is something a little bit more difficult, because my worry is when we work in a, sorry, so what I'm trying to say is, when you're directing creative or tech or whatever, face to face, it's easy to have a conversation, to understand and to talk around what someone's trying to achieve and how they can best achieve it. It's very easy when you go into sort of a digital chat-based thing or something like that to move into much more a kind of, here's a list of changes I want you to make, that's not right, this is what it has to be, you know, that much more functional and kind of a hardline approach. And I completely think that that's the wrong way to go. It's just it would be an easy habit to make. And so I think what I'm noticing is that the need to, because of the sense that, you know, everybody is in a slightly uncertain place, that actually having the conversations that support one another and help guide one another, that we might not have had a habit around, this is how we do those before, are super important. The idea that we can actually say, well, let's get on a call, have a chat about that thing without kind of a negative bias. I think that's so important, and it's something that I'm saying because I feel like it's really how we maintain if you like, the standard of work that we expect as a business, and that anybody expects as a business. And that's certainly how I'm doing it, is making sure that we're talking a lot, and even if it's those softer conversations, just to sort of say, well, let's chat over what you're trying to achieve, and then maybe following it up on digital, but like having those conversations face to face is super important.
And Jamie, what about ambition? I've been thinking about this a lot over the last 48 hours, that you know, everyone's gone defensive in their mindsets, and most businesses are sort of pulling spend everywhere, and you know, and most agencies and other businesses are kind of thinking about, you know, furloughing and cost savings, and you know, what the future might hold. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But what about, you know, is it the right time to start being a bit ambitious, to talk about pivoting business models, and, you know, start thinking about the future? Should we be doing this as an agency owner? Should we lead this charge?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. I mean, I think anybody, I mean, for all of us in the digital space, without wanting to go too heavy on it, this whole thing is an opportunity, because what the whole country has realized is the importance of our ability to connect in a digital way, to work in a digital way, to offer services that include digital self-service. We're going to come out the back of it. All of the clients that we're working with are going to be looking to build efficiencies as their business, you know, has to hold on to quite a lot of cost coming out the back of it. There is a huge amount of opportunity this represents. I think we're in a very early stage where people are just recovering from the shock and like the transition period of kind of getting up or maintaining some business going forward. But I think you know, like as we move into this, you know, from a marketing point of view, finding new markets as old ones drop off, like we do a lot of work in the travel sector, and the travel sector has been hit one of the hardest out of anybody. But of course, you know, they will need to start to think, well, people will still be booking travel for like next year and so on and so forth. So there's only so long that you can sort of batten down the hatches before it actually starts to kind of have a long-term effect. So there's that, there's the operational stuff. So people are obviously, we're all lucky because we're all digitized, but a lot of our clients maybe less so. We can help make that happen for them. The ability to be agile, we've all been talking about it for years, but everybody is suddenly realizing, oh, that's what it actually means, right? When this huge change hits our market, hits your sector, the ability to pivot, the ability to see and make the most of the changes that are happening quickly is vital. And we've been talking about how digital and automation of your interactions and, you know, connected environment, ecosystem of digital services and so on helps make that happen. And, you know, finally, from the point of view of the actual products and services, from a creative and design perspective, how that can help businesses to create those offerings and that positioning that kind of reflects a changing market. All of those things are kind of where we all sit. So as soon as we can start having positive conversations about how we help businesses move through this, even if it's just training and support, to have conversations like we're having this morning, to say, here's how we're dealing with this situation, because we're already through and through digital, we can help you do the same. Those are all valuable. So where can we help is really the question.
That's amazing. Okay, and I think that's very inspiring for a lot of the agencies on the channel as well. So if you want any questions answered, please feel free to use the Q&A. We've got some messages going on here as well. And one of the, I'm just conscious we've only got 5 minutes left, and I'm sure the BIMA guys want to sort of summarize at the end. But one of the questions that's come through is, what's the best channel for micro meetings and sort of dropping in that Zandra mentioned? So some of the things you're doing, Zandra, what's the kind of, what do you use for that technology wise?
It feels like it's changing on a daily basis. I never knew what house party was until last week. My mother introduced me to that. House party. 70, which is absolutely brilliant, right? Teams is what we use as a business, but actually back to the point that was made on the webinar chat. Yeah, people will drop a quick chat, you know, are you free now? Quick one-word reply, yes. They dial you. You have that 2 or 3 minute conversation. They go, oh, can we get somebody else in? Can you join? Yes, dial them in. And within 10 minutes, you could have had 2 or 3 people drop out in a quick conversation, make a decision on something, and everyone drops back into their day-to-day. So for us, it's any platform that enables you to do both that kind of WhatsApp type quick chat and in an instant messenger, but at the same time you can dial each other in. And there are multiple platforms, that is, but Teams works really well for us, Microsoft Teams, and House Party with my mum.
Yeah, interesting. We're using Teams as a business as well. We use Slack and Teams actually. Teams for video calling just because it's a lot better. But I think the problem with Teams is that you can only get sort of 4 videos at any one time. So whenever we do social stuff, we end up using Zoom because with Zoom, obviously you can have multiple screens and you can sort of all see each other, which is good in some ways and a bit weird in others, unless you've got an agenda, because everyone sort of sits there with their glass of wine looking at each other going, who's going to say something first? But, you know, that was the first few until we got used to it. But also, yeah, Slack is great for it as well. You can have sort of multiple people dialing in, although Slack's video is just nowhere near as good quality as, well, I say quality, it's the connectivity and just the time it takes, the latency, and it's not quite as good as anything else really. So I really should turn my phone off. Okay, that's great. Is there any other questions then? Because we haven't got any questions apart from that answered. This question has been answered live. There's no other questions at the moment. So we've got 4 minutes, and one of the things I'd like is just a quick summary in terms of, you know, maybe just like 1 minute each in terms of, you know, how deep do we think this is going to go? And I don't mean to want to end on a negative, but how deep is it going to go? What are you preparing for? And, you know, and is there any particular, maybe one particular opportunity that you've also taken from this? Sorry, Jamie, do you want to go first?
Oh man, why did you ask me first?
Sorry. How deep will it go, Jamie? Come on.
I think well,
I think a lot worse before it gets better.
Sorry, I don't want to be really negative, but I think it's going to go pretty deep. I mean, I feel like, you know, the guidance from the government to say, you know, sort of we're talking 3 months before we're turning a corner. That's fine. I think probably we're going to see that, and we'll hopefully start to see sooner than 3 months businesses start to kind of decide to move forward, because this is the new normal in many ways. So sort of find out, like, have conversations about what we can do. So I'm hoping that happens. I feel like, however, the picking up the pieces is going to take a long time. It's kind of, I mean, in a way, it feels like the elephant in the room. I feel like we were just picking up the pieces after the Brexit thing, and then now, you know, we had a month where it was like great, and then this has hit. So from a business perspective, I think it's going to be a long time before you know, we've cleaned up after this. I think that, as I've already said, there are opportunities aplenty. We just have to, what we're doing as a business is just making sure that we're, if you like, looking after our team as well as we can, so that we maintain that team of experts, and we're ready to change as the sort of landscape changes and make the most of that.
That's great. And Gillian, what about you? I mean, we've got just 2 minutes left, so if you want to just do a quick summary in terms of, you know, where you see how deep do you think it's going? You know, should we really be preparing probably more than we are now, and any particular opportunity that you've seen as a result of this?
Okay, I think it will end eventually, but I think we are creating new habits now that will not change. And if we all keep looking at now and not the future, everybody will go slightly mad and it will be very depressing. So for me, it's about starting now to think about how we address those new habits, those new ways of doing things, and make them permanent rather than some of the temporary fixes we've got now. And that's the opportunities that we're looking at. You know, look to the future, look at how we bring that on board, start to have a plan. If we've got to adjust that plan, we've got to adjust that plan. But we need to start looking at what those opportunities are and how things will be different in the future, because they won't be the same again. Embrace it rather than being scared of it.
Fantastic, thank you. And Zandra, do you want to finish us off?
Yeah, really quickly, I've put in the chat something called Tech Force 19. There are always challenges people are trying to solve. There are winners, there are losers, there are things and organizations that are busy and getting busier. You know, look for the winners. They're there. There are opportunities to engage in projects. It is, for me, about constantly looking to see where there are things we can usefully and purposefully deploy our services and our team into. And whilst it may only be temporarily in the next 6 months, but if we can do that, then it keeps everybody focused on something that actually delivers value and keeps their morale up and keeps the team engaged. So at the other side of this, we have a team that's ready to springboard. So that's just one link, but there's lots of stuff out there, so look for it.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. And we're up for time now. So just a quick thank you to Zandra, Jamie and Gillian. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks, Holly, for hosting us. Do you want to do the final sign off?
Yeah, I can't summarize that. Apologies. It was fantastic. Thank you. I think, wow, what a cracking last question. I think if you're all happy, would love to have you back and do, you know, the next session on this. I think there's loads to talk about, and obviously as everything starts to it's, you know, constantly changing, the idea of discussing new opportunities, addressing new habits, feels like quite an exciting one. So this session has been recorded and will be on YouTube for everyone. We will also do a follow-up email with a bit of a summary, and anything any of the speakers want to do, any links, anything like that, we'll share those with you as well. And last but not least, I'd remind you, if you're not on our Slack channel, to email anthony@bima.co.uk. Phil Sinky has a different facial hair and hat every time I see him. And we will get you onto that, where basically we're updating on a kind of hourly basis. If we are not doing something that you would like to see, give us a shout and we will try and make it happen. But that is all for now. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks again to all the speakers. Yeah, cheers.
You're welcome. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.